How I Attended an All Guys Mixer was a surprisingly fun adult rom-com where they're all in college, kind of a slice of life thing going, and it manages to take a really simple concept and have a lot of fun with it in the execution. It's essentially a mixer with 3 guys that are all friends and 3 girls that are all friends that work at a drag king bar. The girls are obviously the ones on the closer side of the screen in the image. So it's called an all guys mixer, but obviously it's 3 girls and 3 guys, even though they dress like guys a majority of the show. And it does a pretty cool thing where you end up with sort of 3 separate rom-coms all tied together by the friend group rolled into one show. From left to right, we have Hagi, Tokiwa, and Asagi. And for the girls, from left to right, we have Fuji, Suo, and Kohaku. And the way that it works out is Asagi is paired with Fuji, who's on the left. Tokiwa is paired off with Suo, who's in the middle. And Hagi is paired off with Kohaku on the right. And it's really a pretty chill show. Any miscommunications get resolved fairly quickly. There's not a ton of drama. The characters all have like their own distinct quirks and personalities. I'm about 60 chapters into the manga, and one of the couples has made it official that they're together. I won't say which one to avoid spoilers, but I would also say the main couple of the 3 mains is probably Tokiwa and Suo, and she's kind of the driver of the whole story. She seems to be the one initiating most things. She seems to like Tokiwa before the show started, and that's kind of why she initiated it all. Even though we still haven't gotten a really full explanation of her character yet. She's kind of mysterious, but it's very obvious that she likes Tokiwa. But something the show does really well is all of the characters have their own distinct personalities, and it lets the show play with a lot of tropes. Fuji, the girl with the purple hair, is a mangaka who creates doujinshi, which is like the boys love gay porn shit. And Asagi is kind of like the optimistic, fun, bouncy guy, but pretty naive. They compare him to a puppy a lot, and he's just generally a super nice guy. And Fuji's much more disinterested and kind of stoic, but she uses Asagi as a model to draw a lot of her degenerate shit. So they're kind of a funny pair together, where you have the stoic chick and the super high energy guy. Hagi is the more typical awkward around girls type guy. He's not dysfunctional, but very clearly nervous. And him with Kohaku is the sort of she's naive and kind of thick and doesn't realize what's going on trope, where he's the high stress guy. So you get them for your kind of miscommunications and misunderstandings. But again, they resolve very quickly, so it's not some drawn out, miserable piece of shit like Rent a Girlfriend. And Tokiwa is more of just a generally normal guy, which I feel like is kind of weird for anime. And Suo is the instigator, but she definitely doesn't talk about herself very much, even though she initiates a lot of the events and the group get-togethers and that sort of thing. So for them, you have sort of where he's aware of what's going on and receptive, but he's not initiating a ton, but they're definitely just taking their time getting to know each other. So it's pretty cool that you get 3 separate rom-coms essentially, along with a kind of group slice of life dynamic where they hang out at the drag king bar, they go to the beach and shopping and just do kind of day-to-day stuff. And it's just a very happy, lighthearted show. And it's nice to have a show with college-age kids where they hang out at bars and they're just kind of going from class to part-time jobs. They're a little bit awkward and it's a slow burn, but it's not miserable to watch or crazy dragged out. None of the characters are really like prolific assholes. They're all just kind of doing their thing and trying to get by. And it has a lot of fun with the whole drag king concept. All the girls pretty routinely show up to class in their work clothes, and a lot of people on campus actually believe that they're men, although there's some pretty clear delineations throughout the show between the men and women. And I guess I'll just go ahead and go full-blown racist, mask off. To me, this is a concept that I don't really think could work that well in an American show, or you'd have to be very selective with your casting or art style. I looked at some drag king bars in Japan, and the women do just look like kind of effeminate pretty boy men. And I don't know if this is because Asian men and women have a little bit less distinction than Caucasian men and women do in general, but it seems believable enough to me that I think it works for the concept. But something I find really fun about the show and the way they use the concept is because Suo is kind of the aggressor or pursuer, and the girls in general act in character of shoujo men tropes, you get a pretty funny dynamic where the guys are the ones pretty frequently being pursued or not instigating. And you see them getting this kind of princess treatment from like the bad boy type of guy or whatever you want to call them in their drag king outfit. The show also does some humorous things where Hagi, because he's attracted to Kohaku in her drag king outfit, starts questioning whether or not he's a bisexual. And this is actually played as a joke at the time and then builds into a serious issue for him later on in the show. I appreciate when things that seem like kind of sidetrack comedy actually do end up being relevant to the stories and characters. And there seems to be a pretty clear cultural distinction, at least from the anime and Japanese stuff that I've seen compared to America, where often the message will be much more accepting someone for who they are, but that doesn't make them the opposite sex. And this show kind of takes that position as well, where he talks about his confused sexuality and his friends are immediately like, but you know she's a girl though, so why would that make you gay or bisexual? But it allows for the girls to be comfortable in their work clothes and kind of playing out these more stereotypically masculine roles in their relationships, while also allowing the guys to still be kind of traditionally masculine, where they want to do things for the girls, where if there's danger, they want to be protective. And I don't know if that's something that would appeal to everyone, but for me personally, it makes the relationship dynamics pretty believable that aesthetically the girls are kind of tomboys, but the things that attract them to the men are the more biologically wired masculine traits. And the general acknowledgement of biology seems like a pretty common thing in anime to me, even when the message is very openly promoting tolerance and individualism. Now, that tangent aside, one of the jokes they make, kind of what I was referring to about how they acknowledge the biological sex, is Asagi gets mistaken for an employee there, and one of the women's just chatting him up thinking it's a chick. And then as soon as she sees his Adam's apple, she's like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I thought you worked here. And she's like immediately done talking to him. So again, just another one of those sort of reinforcements of acknowledging the biology, but allowing people to have the freedom to behave how they please without shaming them or looking down on them. Some of the other ways that it has a lot of fun with the drag king dynamic is situations where the guys are seen out with the girls, but everyone around them thinks the girls are very pretty men. This is something that happens a lot with Suo and Tokiwa, where they call Suo's drag king persona the prince, and there's a bunch of girls on campus that have a crush on him, and they see Tokiwa with both her in drag king outfit and her in her feminine outfits, and they think that Tokiwa is two-timing the prince with Suo. Also, the thing with Hagi comes up where he's questioning his sexuality, because once he starts to see Kohaku in her female outfits, he's like, why am I trying to think of her in her male outfits and vice versa? And he feels like he's attracted to whichever one she isn't in, and like he's somehow betraying her. And this leads to a really nice character moment where he eventually realizes that he just likes her regardless of how she's dressed, for who she is and how they get along. It also leads to some stuff where Kohaku sees a pair of girls' shoes at his place, and it's his sister, and she doesn't realize it. And she becomes insecure about him seeing her as not a potential dating partner just because she has low self-esteem. And this isn't specifically drag related, but it does come into play that her sister's like, introduce me to your hot friend. So they have some fun with that as kind of like an ongoing gag, which the show very smartly leverages into Hagi's sister, allowing Kohaku to kind of vent later on and open up about her frustrations. So she ends up being kind of the go-between for Hagi and Kohaku because of this drag, partial miscommunication, but also her kind of figuratively and literally wearing the outfit as a way to keep her guard up. And I think because the show pretty smartly has 3 plots going along with the main group dynamic plot, even though the romance is progressing at a pretty relaxed pace, it does have a nice slow burn but productive feel with each episode and chapter, because each plot has its own thing going on, and because progress is slowly being made. It feels very naturally like the characters are just hanging out and getting to know each other better instead of rushing into a relationship or focusing only on getting into a relationship. And to me, this show is a very good example of kind of a slice of life rom-com slow burn, where it always feels like the relationship is developing, even if it isn't these massive emotional swings and big events. It just feels like the whole group is gradually getting closer to one another as each of the 3 couples does the same. Because for me personally, I think a lot of the frustration that people have with rom-coms in general is where people call it a slow burn, but what you really end up actually getting is either really dumb miscommunications that last forever, or just character resets every time there's actual progress. Rent a Girlfriend is the peak for this, of just baiting the illusion of progress and then a hard reset on a bunch of asshole characters. So overall, I think the show does a lot of things really well. It really kind of came out of nowhere for me. I just turned it on one day and ended up binge watching the whole show in a weekend and then picking up the manga where the show ended right after. And now I'm annoyingly waiting for next chapter to come out. Overall, definitely a recommend for me if you're looking for a pretty chill slice of life rom-com that I think does some interesting things with kind of rom-com tropes without ever being too serious. I would say it's definitely a very feel-good show. I'm gonna leave it there for this one. If you've seen it, let me know what you think. Try to respond to the comments that aren't just insults. Like and subscribe and all that shit. Thanks. See ya.